Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Infinity series. Let's see what we have today. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Write Project podcast. Today, we have a very special guest on. We have Jennifer Shelby, who is an Atlantic Canadian author. You've heard some of her work before. Her short fiction was featured on an episode of the Write Project podcast, where she allowed us to play it in its entirety, the audio presentation of The Sea Lion, the Witch, and the Universe, to much acclaim. She's got her own novella out now, the fifth book in the Slipstreamers saga from Engine Book, called Plague of the Dreamless. Thank you for joining us on the Write Project podcast, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. Anytime. So can you tell me a little bit about Plague of the Dreamless and what gave you the inspiration for it and what it's about and all that kind of stuff?
Wow. Okay. I actually originally had the idea for this when the call was out from Engine Books for stories for dystopia from the rock, and I was trying to come up with my dystopian world, and I came up with this world where people had to surrender their imaginations for like an industrial realm that imaginations were counter to, and it really ended up being way too much for a short story for that collection. So I held on to it, and then when the Slipstreamers call came out, I knew that was probably the one. So I pitched it, and you accepted it, and it's essentially, in this book, Cassidy travels through a portal to a realm. It's like another planet with these crazy octopus creatures in the sky, and the people who live there have to have their imaginations extracted when they reach adulthood. And the reason for this is it makes them better factory employees, and they're told that their imaginations go to the cephalopods, the octopus creatures, that use their imaginations to create transcendental technologies, which of course perks Cassidy's ear because she wants to get some of that for Professor Gamgee. And then she's also recovering from a cold. So when she goes to this place, she doesn't realize that she's introducing a cold virus to a place that has never had one before, and that quickly takes over and plot things happen, and it's all very exciting.
That's so interesting. That actually, until you said it out loud, I didn't really realize like how inspired by H.G. Wells it can seem to be, because the idea of like the big like octopus creatures being from a world that's susceptible to a cold virus, that's very much the end, spoilers for this 100-year-old novel, of H.G. Wells, is like the creatures from another world, or sorry, what's the name of it? War of the Worlds, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, that is what happens in War of the Worlds. So there you go.
But it's like in reverse, because Cassidy's the invader.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
But it doesn't end as badly as it did for the aliens, thank goodness.
No, but it does actually end with a plot point, because the Slipstreamers, where it's a series, sometimes authors give us things that we can then use in other books. Like the author determines what that can be used. So your stuff is definitely going to be used later on in the series. We've got the end of the season of the like book 15 planned, and your stuff gets used quite a bit.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, it's going to be lots of fun. There actually, we used 3 people's different tech that they brought back and used it together in a way that neither author probably fully intended, but like it's one of those fun things where you see the pieces put together and you could see how things could work off each other, almost like a DM with, you know what I mean? Like where the players take individual parts and use them in a way and the DM didn't foresee.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah, it
It's like
should
a
be.
school.
Yeah, it should be super fun. It's almost like War of the DMs because like usually the storytellers think of themselves as a DM. There's just like
Yeah.
the the storyteller DMs and the editor DMs and the manager DMs and oh my god, the DM.
And some of my favorite stories come from that sort of thing too, like just having a bunch of unrelated ideas that come together and form something completely new, and it's just mind blowing and amazing.
That's fun. I'm glad. That's super cool. Well, your story was absolutely amazing. The second I read it, I was like, "Oh, I'm so lucky that we've got this on there because it's just."
I was so glad to hear that.
Oh yeah, no, people just go crazy. Some people, like some people, went a bit safe, and that's fine because you need a few safe entries in there. Like the world can't blow up every week, but some people went
True.
nuts, and it's really fun to see people go nuts. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Yep.
I'm definitely enjoying the books that I've read so far.
Awesome,
I
awesome. I hear you have a little one at home that is also enjoying them.
Yes, my 8-year-old asked if she could read it, and I decided that was okay. She's a pretty advanced reader, and she just loved it. She was actually giving me the tips on her favorite parts before you called, so that I wouldn't forget them.
I see.
Which is, but I gave a copy to Chris for Christmas to my best friend, and they've been reading it to my goddaughter, who's also 8, and she's really enjoying it too. So that's just wonderful.
Awesome, awesome. Has your daughter read the other ones as well, or just yours?
Just mine so far. If she wants to read them, I'll let her. But I know that like there were some concepts that she struggled a bit with, so she might want to give it a year or so. But I do have them here. Yeah, she raids my bookshelf quite regularly.
Lovely, lovely. That's wonderful. Yeah. So we'll look forward to season 2. Hopefully you got some more ideas percolating in there because this was a good book, and we'd like to see some people come back for sure.
Oh, that's really, yes. There's always ideas.
Mm.
Cassidy's such a great character.
She really is. I can't like I was really gifted when I came up with her because I don't know what was I'm glad it worked out because everyone, this is about you, not me, but like everyone took it and ran with it and everyone kind of got it. Like it was simple enough, like because if you make a character too complicated and then you give it to another author, it can become really hard for the other author to work with it. But there's got to be enough meat on the bone for them to like not be totally lost. You know what I mean? Like it's a tightrope, and I'm glad that and I knew I'd done it right when I started to get all the drafts back, like before we decided on the order, and everyone was just sending in their drafts, and I was deciding, which ones got in and which ones didn't, and which ones needed tweaking and whatever. And I realized that a lot of people had consistent characterization. That's when I knew that I'd done it right. You know what I mean? Like we didn't need to edit that much for consistently because the pitch was good enough that people were consistent.
Lovely. Yeah, I've noticed that reading the other books, it's really fun to see how other people saw her, because I did notice a few small tone differences, but it worked. It all worked, and it really gave her more depth than she might have had otherwise, because I know when I was writing it, I was a bit extra careful with that stuff, I guess, because I didn't want to really make her too much my own because I hadn't read the other books yet. But it was a really fun challenge, and I think that it really turned out well. I'm happy with it. And
I think it'll be even easier for returning authors to do it now because so many people have read the other people's stuff and like gotten an even more rounded view of her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot more about her now that I've read the other books than I definitely did when I started. So she's got a lot of different facets that people brought out according to their own strengths, and it was fun to watch her sort of grow.
Awesome. What advice would you give to your younger writing self, your younger self about writing, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice?
Oh, that's a big one. I'd probably just tell myself to keep writing. I think that's the best advice I've ever been given, and it's been given to me by a few different authors that I've met. So it has held true, and I think it would be that just keep writing. I did get discouraged and overwhelmed, early in my 20s, and I think that's kind of set me at a late start. And that's fine. That's my path. But I wish I'd kept writing then instead of taking that long break.
For sure. For sure. And that's pretty common actually, because I mean, like, you can't get better. But like, if your writing is flawed, and some people's is and some people's isn't, but like, you can't get better without writing it and then seeing the flaws and then moving forward. Like, there's no shortcut where it's like, well, if I just wait till I'm 30, then I'll be a good writer and I'll start. Like, no, you'll still actually be bad. Like, you got to get
Yeah.
those bad books out before you can get to the good stuff.
Absolutely. That's the thing.
Yeah, you might as well get it out like when you're 8, so then everyone will forgive you.
Exactly. The stuff I wrote when I was 8 was just so brilliant.
Yeah. For an 8-year-old, it was great.
Yeah. People don't have great expectations for 8-year-olds, so there's that.
I remember I wrote like a little, like, what I thought was a novel, but it wasn't, when I was like 8. It was a novel about milk. And it was like 12 pages long, but like each page had a giant picture on it and then a few sentences. And I worked on it the entire like week, and I gave it to my like second grade or third grade teacher, and she read it in like 2 minutes, and I was just perturbed that like she liked it and it was great, but I was like, I can't believe you read that in 2 minutes. That took me all week. Not a great investment of time.
Yep. Even with the novella, if you think about it, because a lot of these novellas you can sit down and probably read in an afternoon if you've got it, and it takes us so much more than that to write them.
Oh, the return on time. Like, I've had people read novels, like full, like 100,000 word novels, and come back the next day with them read. And I'm like, on the one hand, yay. But on the other hand, do you know how much time that took me? Savor it.
Imagine how filmmakers must feel, because it's literally, an hour and a half.
That represents years and sometimes decades of work. Yeah. What animal represents your writing life the best? Like, if your writing experience slash your writing self, whatever, suddenly was anthropomorphized and became like a little animal buddy to follow you around, what animal would it be?
Wow. I'm working on a heron story, so I want to say heron, but I think it's probably a moth, and not just because I'm obsessed with moths in a weird way, but I think there's a lot of cocooning involved to writing for me. I need to go inside my little cocoon and ruminate and think way too much before, and then finally I come out of my cocoon and I write. And it's probably not the most efficient method, but it is the way mine works. So yeah, I'm gonna go with moth.
Okay. Two things. First, you are hilarious in like the way the questions are taking you off guard. You're just like, wow, all right. B, like, you were like, I'm obsessed with moths in an unhealthy way, and I'm like, is there a healthy way to be obsessed with moths?
I have written so many moth stories. It's just like it's absurd. I laugh at myself, and then I have another moth story idea, so it's like a problem. But anyway.
I'm picturing like a moth erotica now, where like the moth slowly over the course of a decade eats the clothes off its lover.
Wow. I did write a dandelion erotica story once, so it could happen. You never know.
All right. A dandelion erotica story. All right. Jennifer Shelby, do you ever base characters on real people? And if so, how do you go about that?
I don't, unfortunately. As a mom, I find that with small kids, you do get very isolated. So I tend to have more people in my head at a time than in my life. So a lot of my social life is through stories, and I don't think that is particularly unusual when you have young children. But that certainly is the way it is for me.
Gotcha. Makes sense. What is the best money you ever spent on your writing? It can be literally anything. It can be food. If it was contributed to your writing, it can be a new desk, it can be a writing program, literally anything, as long as in your head you justified it as, yeah, this is for my writing.
I think it was my first left-handed nib on a fountain pen. I'm left-handed and I like to write by hand, and that limits you to a point because at some point you do get writer's cramp, right? And I'd heard that if you used a fountain pen, you wouldn't get writer's cramp, but they're obviously a lot more expensive than your regular ballpoint pen or even a nice, Pilot fine marker thing. But I I splurged once and I got a Lamy Safari with the left-handed nib, and it was the most I'd ever spent on a pen. And it's beautiful. I mean, it skates across the page like you're the first person on the rink after the Zamboni, and I can write for hours now, and I absolutely would do that again in a heartbeat, but I already have one, so I don't need to, but I highly recommend it.
They have left hand. That's beautiful, and I love that image of like skating after a Zamboni. But like, they have left-handed nibs.
Yes.
I don't think of nibs as being right-handed or left-handed. What makes a nib right-handed or left-handed?
Well, apparently it's in the way that the nib actually touches the page, because with the fountain pen, it's supposed to be very smooth, but if you're left-handed, you hold the pen a bit differently. And you can train yourself not to, but once you start training yourself, it doesn't flow quite as well, right? So with the left-handed nib, you don't have to readjust the way you naturally hold a pen to be able to use it as smoothly as a right-handed person will. And I don't know the exact schematics of this filing or whatever, but it does help. And I do have a few right-handed nibs, and I do notice that it catches, it scrapes the page, and it's not as pleasant.
Oh dear. Okay. Interesting. I never would have thought. I never would have thought of that being a right-handed, left-handed. The thing that we right-handers take for granted, I swear.
Yes. Scissors and nibs.
Horrible. Do you think that having a big ego helps an author, or do you think it hurts authors?
I see it hurt people on Twitter when they like go off on their bad takes that they decide they're an authority on. But at the same time, I think sometimes it would help more if my ego was bigger, because I think it would be easier to market myself and to put my stuff out there if I was really overconfident. But I think like for the most part, most of the writers I know aren't super overconfident people. We tend to be more introverted, but so I think there's a balance there.
Awesome. Interesting. Okay. No, that's fair. And it's interesting that the way you phrased it, that like you phrased it in such a way that like someone's Twitter persona isn't necessarily their real persona, and maybe that's where the ego and the id come out. And I found that to be true, if that is what you intended, where it's like your impulse control goes away when you're on the tweet book.
Maybe. I don't know if that's what I meant, but I see your point, and you might have made a better one than myself.
Excellent. Jennifer Shelby, this is an interesting one for you because I know this is fairly new to you, but does being published change how you write?
I don't think so. If I try to write for an editor or for an audience that doesn't include me, I tend to get really stuck. So I try not to think about that stuff too much when I'm writing, because then I just lose my flow and the story just flutters away from me. So
that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I tend to come the same way. No, I tend to come from it the same way. Like, write a story that's entertaining to you, and if you find it entertaining, chances are someone else will as well.
Yes, and I've very much learned the hard way that some of the people that I desperately want to be my audience aren't my audience, and that sucks if it's someone that you really look up to. But I mean, at the same time, it's just one more step to finding the right one, right?
It is, and that's something that happens. I find one of the hardest things to make an author realize, and myself included, is
Mhm.
that they are not their ideal reader. Like everyone thinks that, like, if you're a big fan of He-Man and you're writing a He-Man story, or that you think you're writing a He-Man story, and then you sit it and you try to market it towards existing He-Man fans or something like that. But maybe you wrote something a little bit different, like your
Yeah.
influence made it different, and you should be marketing it over here to this other spot, but you're not. Like you want to market it to your people, so you keep pushing it towards He-Man fans, you know?
Yep.
Writers aren't readers. Like we are in that we do read, but like it's not, you tend to think of things differently once you've got a few published materials under your belt. So it can be very difficult to explain to an author who thinks they know what the readers want, to sit them go and go like you it's like it's almost like like a boomer trying to understand what a youth wants. You know what I mean? Where they're trying. That's what it's like when an author tries to understand what the reader wants. It's like you don't know. Leave that to the
Yeah.
marketing people.
Yeah. Just figure out what the story wants.
Yeah. Funny. What did you do with the first money that you made from writing?
I bought myself a notebook. It was a lovely notebook too.
You buy notebooks?
I do, because I write by hand. So a nice notebook is a lovely thing to write in. And yeah, so I bought myself a notebook and no regrets.
I write in notebooks, but I find that nobody knows what to give me for a gift. I'm told I'm very hard to shop for, so I just get notebooks. Notebooks are like socks. I've never had to buy any. They just keep getting given to me.
Ah, see, you're lucky. My grandmother usually gives me one every year, and I love it. I never know. They're always very different from the last. I never know what to expect, and they're just a lot of fun to get them. But yeah, I don't get given that many, so I do have to buy my own. Although, you know what, I have a friend who worked in an office, and um they were cleaning out someone who retired, and they just sent me by surprise this huge box full of like 30 notebooks, and it was like Christmas and birthdays for several years thrown into one when I opened this box, and I still have about 10 left, and it just still delights me every time I look at them.
Jennifer Shelby, what did you edit out of your most recent novel or novella or short story?
um, just give me a second. I've been working on a story for like the entire month, and I need to get it done. It's due in 30 days now, and I just edited out every single character and I replaced them with completely different opposite characters, and it's going to be a major overhaul. But I do think it's going to be better for the story, and it's a lot more fascinating with these new characters than it was before. So I'm excited to where it's going to go. But I'm a pretty heavy editor. Like nothing even looks like the original draft when I'm done. So
Interesting. Interesting. Due in 30 days. Is that a certain engine collection, possibly?
uh, no, it's
Oh,
that one's already written.
oh good.
This it's a grant uh, put on by RBC, and I need to offer a story with it. And I mean, it's probably going to go to literary fiction, but I always have to try because it would be awesome to win it. So and you know, at the other side, I still have a story that I can tell, so I'm happy with it.
Wow. Okay. Sounds good. Does the physical act of writing, when you do it every day or every few days, does it energize you or does it exhaust you? Like when you're out of it and you're done, are you given a lot of energy and like you can start your day now, or is it just leave? Is it energy leaving you?
Oh no, it's like I fizz. Like I honestly, if I'm like a bubbly drink when I'm done, I have so much. It bursts, and yeah, I have so much creative energy when I'm done that I probably won't sleep well afterwards. And as someone with young kids, I do tend to be writing at night after they're in bed, so it's not really great for my sleep habits. But you know, it works, and it's just like the happiest feeling. It's just it's wonderful. I love it. There's so many like serotonin and something bursting, and it's wonderful.
Awesome. Does your family support your career as an author?
Yeah, absolutely. My spouse is really supportive. He usually I usually read everything out loud to him before I send it to any of my critique partners. And he's not a big reader, but he's really good at visualizing things, and he catches things that I don't catch. Like, he's very mechanically minded, so he'll point out like, oh, this person wouldn't drive that sort of thing, and it's really helpful in that way. And my kids, one of them is only 4, so obviously she's not reading too many of them. But my older daughter, who is almost 9, she loves to read and she loves the stories. And I've got a couple of children's stories published that she pulls out regularly and wants to read with me. And yeah, it's wonderfully supportive.
That's adorable. That sounds so fun. I can't wait for stuff like that. That's the idea of a kid pulling out a story that you wrote and wanting you to read them to them. That is just precious.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's got to feel great. Speaking of, from your experience, Jennifer Shelby, what was your favorite childhood book?
Emily of New Moon, no question.
I love that one.
Yes, I must have read that trilogy. Just as soon as I was done, I'd started over from the beginning again. And I don't know if the last one really resonated as well as the first 2, because I was young, but I love them. I have the fondest memories of them, and they're so tattered now. Like, I had to get new ones so that my daughter can read them when she's ready.
Awesome. Montgomery is often the answer to that question. A few of my authors have answered with the Anne of Green Gables series. You're the first one to say. Usually they'll say New Moon as like an afterthought, but
Yeah.
and say that one. You're the first one to say like Emily of New Moon first, which I enjoy, because that was of those 2 works by Montgomery. New Moon is the one I go. There was something about it where it's almost like it's way ahead of its time. Like, that's almost where YA is now, where it's like a little bit supernatural historical fiction. You know what I mean?
Yep, and it had like some real creepy elements too that worked, and they weren't so creepy that they, bother you too much, but they're definitely there.
Yeah, big time. It was really ahead of its time. Like, it does not get the credit, or the author, doesn't get the credit she deserves for basically creating the YA supernatural fiction market, like way before Twilight and Hunger Games and all that did.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think I've read everything she's written, and I love them all, but Emily definitely stands out. Maybe, I mean, certainly as writers, we're gonna Emily's gonna resonate, but there's a lot to that. And like, if you think about the work that went into it too, because she has so many quotes and clips of things that Emily wrote that were in Emily's voice and not in Lucy Maud Montgomery's voice, and like just little things like that, they're just so phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's really hard to write in another voice like that, to write someone writing. You know what I mean?
I don't think I could do it at this point. I mean, now I kind of want to try, but that would be very challenging. And yeah, she really nailed it.
Go a step further when you try it. Like, write a story about a character who's a writer, so they write their voices, but that character is also writing a story about a writer, so it insteps one step further. So the whole story will be in your voice, but then parts of it will have to be in the first author's voice, and parts of it will have to be in the second fictional author's voice, but it'll be a little bit of all 3 authors before it in the inception loop. Like, it'll be little bits of
Wow. Maybe that could be a future Slipstreamers book.
Yeah. And it turns out that, like, that's how Cassidy realizes she's fictional. like it keeps just going down, and then eventually, like, 5 levels down, it's a Cassidy story.
I love it. It's just like, stories all the way down.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming on the Right Project podcast, Jennifer. Everyone, please check out Plague of the Dreamless. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. Anytime. Pleasure to have you on.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.